When I married Daniel, I thought my life had finally settled into a rhythm I could count on. He was a kind-hearted man, steady in his ways, reliable in the sense that he always made sure the bills were paid, the cars were maintained, and the house was safe. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone knew one another, and weekends often meant barbecues or porch gatherings. But what I didn't expect when I married him was how profoundly his son, Michael, would change the course of my life. Michael was 21 when I officially became his stepmother. He had just returned home from college for the summer, carrying sketchbooks under his arm and paint stains on his clothes. From the first day I met him, he was polite, though reserved. He had his father's eyes but his mother's artistic spirit, and though I had never met his biological mother, Daniel often described her as a free soul who believed art was a language more powerful than words. Michael had inherited that gift in abundance. Our home had a small room that Daniel jokingly called the studio. It wasn't really a studio, just a converted den with large windows that let the sunlight in, but Michael transformed it into his creative space. The floor was speckled with old paint, canvases leaned against every wall, and jars of brushes filled the shelves. I admired his dedication but kept my distance, not wanting to intrude on the world he was building with his own hands. One afternoon, not long after Michael returned, I found myself lingering near the studio door. I could hear the faint sound of music drifting out, instrumental guitar, soft and thoughtful. When I peeked inside, I saw him bent over a canvas, completely immersed. His hands moved with such precision, and his expression carried the kind of focus that seemed almost otherworldly. For a moment, I envied him. He could lose himself in colors and strokes, while I was stuck worrying about grocery lists and dinner menus. A few days later, while Daniel was away on a work trip, Michael asked me something I wasn't prepared for. "Would you sit for me?" he said, standing in the doorway of the kitchen while I was chopping vegetables. "Sit for you?" I repeated, unsure what he meant. "For a painting," he clarified. "I've been trying to capture something real, something human, and I can't do it from memory. I need someone to be my subject, just to sit there while I paint." I hesitated. It felt strange, the idea of being studied so closely, especially by my stepson. But there was something earnest in his voice, something almost pleading. I agreed, thinking it would be a harmless way to support his passion. The first time I sat for him, the room was quiet except for the occasional scratch of his pencil against the canvas. He asked me to sit by the window so the natural light would fall across my face. At first, I felt self-conscious, folding my hands in my lap and wondering if I looked awkward. But as minutes stretched into hours, I realized he wasn't just drawing me, he was seeing me. Really seeing me. Every detail, every angle, every fleeting expression seemed to matter to him. "You have a softness in your eyes," he murmured once, almost to himself. I smiled nervously. "Is that a compliment, or an artist's observation?" "Both," he replied, his eyes never leaving the canvas. Day after day, I found myself back in that room. Sometimes I would bring him iced tea and stay longer than I planned, just to watch him work. Other times, he would call me in because he wanted to capture how light fell on my hair at a certain hour of the afternoon. It became our quiet ritual, a secret space where time slowed down and the rest of the world disappeared. The painting evolved in ways I couldn't have imagined. At first, it was just outlines and shadows. Then came layers of color, depth, and texture. But more than that, I could feel something unspoken forming between us. It wasn't the kind of love you read about in fairy tales, nor was it inappropriate. It was complicated, delicate, and filled with emotions that neither of us dared to name. Daniel noticed the time we spent together, but he didn't question it. "You've been good for him," he told me one night while we sat on the porch. "Michael's always been a little guarded, but I see him opening up since you've been around. I think you bring him comfort." His words cut deep, because I wasn't sure comfort was the right word for what I brought to Michael's life. There was something deeper, something I was too afraid to admit even to myself. One evening, while the rain tapped gently against the windows, Michael finished the painting. He asked me to close my eyes before he turned it around. "Okay," he whispered. "Open them." I gasped when I saw it. It wasn't just me on the canvas. It was me as he saw me. The softness of my eyes, the light in my hair, the quiet strength in my posture. He had captured not only my image but my essence. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected my soul rather than my face. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice trembling. "It's you," he replied simply. At that moment, the air between us grew heavier, filled with words unsaid. I wanted to tell him how deeply it moved me, how much it meant to be seen in a way no one had ever seen me before. But instead, I just stood there, my heart pounding. We never crossed a line, never spoke the feelings that lingered between us. But from that day forward, I carried the memory of that painting with me. It reminded me that love comes in many forms, not always simple, not always easy, but always powerful. Michael eventually returned to college, and the studio felt emptier without him. Daniel and I continued our life together, but sometimes when I walked past the studio, I would stop and look at the canvas he had left behind. In those quiet moments, I felt both joy and sorrow. Joy for being seen so profoundly, and sorrow for knowing that some connections, no matter how meaningful, must remain unspoken. Years later, when Michael became a successful artist with exhibitions across the country, he would sometimes call and tell me about his new work. His voice always carried a certain warmth when he spoke to me, a reminder of the bond we shared. And though he never said it outright, I knew I would always be his muse. And perhaps, in some unexplainable way, he would always be mine.